Welcome everyone to the 2023 Right Hive Conference. Today's panel is running a literary magazine. I am XM Moon, full-time freelance editor and designer and sometimes author, and I will let our panelists go ahead and introduce themselves, starting with Lauren.
Hi, everybody. My name is Lauren Davila. I am an agented author, anthologist, and current acquisitions editor for Inked and Gray Press. I've been sort of in the creative sphere for a good couple of years now. Have a few anthologies, one of which is, I picked the right side this time, right here, Places We Build in the Universe, which is an adult Latinx genre anthology covering sci-fi, fantasy, and romance short stories. I guess that's pretty much it, but excited to chat about some literary work here today.
Hi, my name is Addie Tsai, and I am a queer and non-binary artist and writer of color. You can see Unwieldy Creatures, which is my most recent novel that was published last fall, and it is a queer, biracial, Asian, non-binary retelling of Frankenstein. I am also the co-editor-in-chief and the founding editor of Just Femme and Dandy, which is a lit mag that is entirely focused on LGBTQIA+ fashion. I also am a fiction co-editor for Anomaly, as well as I run their features and reviews, and I'm super happy to be here. Yeah.
I absolutely love that title, by the way, the Just Femme and Dandy. Diamond.
Hi, everybody. I am Diamond. I'm a queer mixed race Black Chicana writer and editor. Now I'm based in Central Texas, and I'm doing my master's program at Texas State. I've been the past editor-in-chief for Defunct Magazine for the past 2 years, and I am currently the founder of Abode Press, which will be launching in August, so I'm excited to talk about that. We are an intersectional anti-racist 501c3 organization based in Central Texas, and we'll have access to Houston, San Antonio, and Austin. And I'm really excited to be here to talk to everybody about what it means to run a lit mag.
Super excited to have you. And last but not least, Nicole.
Yeah, I'm Nicole, she, they pronouns. I have written several books with indie presses, and then more recently have founded Knee Brace Press, which is a literary magazine devoted to creative work around chronic conditions, disability, mental health, and neurodivergence. So I do believe I'm the person on this panel who is most new to the lit magazine. So I'm also really excited to learn from everyone else.
Awesome. Well, I'm super excited to have all of you here. So as a kind of intro question to get us kicked off, can you give us, obviously you kind of start with the lit mags you're associated with, but can you give us an explanation of lit mags as a genre of work, I guess, as well as some names people might recognize, and then the difference kind of between independent magazines versus more institutionalized, bigger like university presses, yes.
I can go. So yeah, it's just such a large encompassing question, but I think a good way to put it is literary magazines are essentially avenues to uplift writers and their work. It can be in the form of, a print journal, but now since we're entering this digital age, we're seeing it a lot more happening online, whether it's like a quarterly issue that features poetry, fiction, arts, or it's something that happens every week. Every magazine is very different. And I saw this number recently where I think there's over like 6,000 literary magazines now. And that number is probably just going to keep growing, and they're constantly going to be changing throughout time. But I think a fun question there is the difference between things like indie presses or indie mags and then, institution-backed organizations. I'm the copy editor for the Porterhouse Review, which is the literary magazine of Texas State's MFA program. And I think a big difference there is there's obviously more funding because these are organizations that have institution funding. And because of that, they're able to usually pay more because indie presses, sometimes we're able to pay, but it does require a lot of labor and effort and time to apply for grants and get funding separately because you don't start off with like institution-backed resources and funding. But ultimately, there really is no right or wrong way. It's just determining what is best for you in your writing and where you want it to appear and what you're looking for. But that's kind of just my idea of an all-encompassing description there. And then if anybody wants to hop off on that.
I think we were going to talk about this later, but I kind of want to talk about it now, which is what has happened to lit mags and the way that one can publish in community. That was not the case when I was starting out and the internet was an infant. And there were, so I started graduate school in 2002, and there were like 5 magazines online, maybe there were that many. And everything was print. And so the internet was, you know, an infant. So you had to go and buy, like, depending if you were a poet or writer. So I started out as a poet. So you had to go buy this like enormous telephone book size thing called the Poets Market or the Writers Market. And that didn't just include lit mags, that also included, you know, agents and publishing houses and presses and contests. But the only way you knew where to submit was this big fat book that you had to read through. It took months for anyone to reject you. You could sort of do simultaneous submissions, but it was sort of hard because by the time you found out, then you'd have to go and write by US Postal Service, all the other places. So, and then because the Institute, you know, because this like wild, exciting, complicated world of internet literary magazines did not really exist then, everything was institution, everything was white dominant, everything was male dominant. When they read your cover letters, they were reading it for the accolades that would kind of like legitimize you as a, you know, someone worth publishing. It was very hard to get out of the slush pile. So it was almost impossible to get published without an MFA advisor, some sort of mentor, knowing somebody that was on the editorial board, or they knew someone was on the editorial board. So to be an emerging or new writer and try to break in was completely different. So I do think that the change that we have now has not just like neutralized the playing field. So there's just like a lot more opportunity. And I do think for the most part, the independently run literary magazines are looking for good work. They don't care if you're 18 or 50. They don't tend to care if you have MFA creds. There's this whole sort of beautiful space for communities, especially underrepresented communities, to find one another through social media, but also through, you know, you start to recognize writers who you really like across lit mags. And so, you know, I don't like to say the kids don't know what it was like, but the kids don't know what it was like. And I'm happy for that. You know, I think that's great, actually. But I just wanted to bring in that because the institution really ran like 99.8% of it. And I feel like the same 20 people were seen all over the place. And so even though I have stuff to say later about the oversaturation of people endlessly creating lit mags, especially lit mags that don't bring anything new, that aren't really bringing anything that's different. I still think overall it's like a really wonderful development that's happened with the technological advancement of internet. And I think social media is a big part of that too, and is one of the really beautiful things that's come out of that.
So I can speak to the institutionalized side of it a little bit more because I have been a part of a few different literary magazines linked in with sort of collegiate experiences, I guess I should say. So I was part of my undergraduate literary magazine, and then the current magazine that I'm working for, that I'm editor-in-chief of, is Foothill Poetry Journal, which is one of the only, I think maybe the only poetry journal specifically for graduate students run by graduate students. So it's a little bit more institutional because we're, you know, under a lot of different parameters in terms of what's being set forth sort of like by a university. So in that aspect, I think maybe it's a little bit different than sort of maybe what Nicole, Diamond, and Addie have to bring to the table, right? Because they're a little bit more on, I don't want to say necessarily the indie side, but have a little bit more flexibility in terms of what they're looking for. And I think it's been an interesting process to, you know, sort through poetry that's, you know, being written by, you know, students who are sort of like in a master's program or an MFA program and like learning craft. And it's a really interesting process. I think it's sort of difficult in the fact that, you know, like I know there's so many other great voices out there, but it's also kind of nice to have like a very specific lane. I've worked with a few other literary journals in the past, are just like open widely to anybody and everything. And I think you get obviously amazing poems, but it's really interesting to sort of see right into the brain of somebody who's really learning so much and it's showing it on the page. So we've had even students who have submitted, we're a yearly publication. So we've had students who have submitted right at like the beginning of their MFA program and like every year or on when they're writing. And so it's been interesting to sort of see how they've changed and grown since then. So we always are telling people, even if we don't accept anything, make sure to resubmit. And a lot of students do end up resubmitting. So that's an interesting process to sort of see that play out in real time. So I guess I'm a little bit on the outskirts for this, but it'll be an interesting conversation to sort of see how it's all coming together and the differences that we'll have with sort of these more specific institutionalized literary magazines versus some that are a little bit more open.
Nicole, what about you?
Yeah, I think everyone touched on a lot of really important points, and I don't have too much to add. I would like to bring to the conversation just talking about like resources for where to find these new lit mags and places to go to submit your work. So Submittable is a really good resource that's free, and you can sort by some magazines charge nothing, some magazines charge $1 or $2, which is about what you would have sent if you had sent it out via postal service. And then Twitter is another really good resource that for Kneebrace, we have a Facebook page, Instagram, Twitter, but I think that Twitter is a place for a lot of lit mags and a lot of writers hang out. So I think that that's also a good place. And then also, a good place to find community, like Addie had touched on before, that a lot of lit mags now are being created by and created for communities that have been historically been left out of these conversations. And so like I've been able to find a lot more disabled writers that I can connect with and that can find my magazine also. So I don't know if anyone else has other resources, but Duotrope is another one, but I do believe you have to subscribe to that one.
Yeah, I think do you guys know about Chill Subs? I know Addie does, but yeah, was started by Karina, and I found out about it through Twitter. So I am seconding the whole Twitter is a good space, even though there are all of these political things going on with it. Sadly, it is like the main platform that we do have. With the start of Abode's launch, most of our followings have been coming in an influx through Twitter. And so it kind of creates a scary relationship in terms of there's this fear of what's going to happen to this social media network, because it is one of the few ways where we are all connected. And there's been discussions on mass migration, but I don't think we've come to any sort of terms on what that looks like yet. So that's just something to keep in mind. But I still agree that most of the community is on Twitter because we're writers and you're writing, and that it's a platform mainly for that. But Chill Subs is a new resource. I guess they've been around for a year, but it's continuously expanding. It looks different every time I get on there, but you're allowed, I think it's even easier to search than Submittable because it has all of these indie mags. Everything that you click is just like, are they open right now? Do I have to pay a submission fee? Do they pay me? Is it in print or is it online? You can search through different types of genres. So I know something with Submittable is really, I feel like it promotes more literary fiction, but Chill Subs is great because it goes into genre fiction, it goes into flash fiction. And so it just kind of really covers the breadth of the writing community and what we're all writing and putting together, but it even has submission trackers, which I think is really cool. I haven't personally used it, but when you're submitting, sometimes places only want you to do it through email. Sometimes they want you to do it through Submittable, and there's just too many different ways to submit. And so that's when you run into those issues with simultaneous submissions is someone will send it and make sure if it gets accepted somewhere that they decline it or that they withdraw that piece in Submittable, but then they forget about the submissions they send through email. So it's a good resource to use in general, just to keep track of everywhere you've submitted to ensure that if something does get picked up, you're able to go back and be like, oh, I forgot that I submitted things through also Duotrope and through Gmail. And it allows you to just kind of keep track of all of that. And it's an indie resource, so it's started by fellow writing community people, and the interface is actually extremely usable and well done. So I think that's a good resource to also keep on your radar as well.
Very cool. So for our next set of questions, and again, I'm gonna kind of ask it as a clump so y'all can speak to the parts you want to. and we've kind of touched on it a little bit, but deciding when and how to start a lit mag, when to work with one, for one, how to choose which ones to submit to. But then some things to kind of think about, I guess, in terms of the work side of running one and working with one. What are the different employees and or skill sets you need? What are, the types of different backgrounds you want to make sure you have, and how do we ensure that we actually have representation and diversity versus, again, only exemplifying that one very narrow, very traditionally served population. Also the things like best practices for workflow and examples of places that have done it really well, how y'all handle them individually, and then cautionary tales for things to avoid. So I know that's a million parts all at once, but Addie, I know you and Lauren have both been around them for a while, so if you have things you want to start us off with, that would be awesome.
Okay. It's like, I don't even know how to get started. So I do want to talk a little bit about like my kind of background. I was the first intern in the sense that I got internship credit for working at Gulf Coast Magazine, which is the literary magazine that is run through the graduate, or at least it was then, I think it still is, run through the graduate program in creative writing. And that was in 1998. So we were using, I think, FileMaker Pro database to like log in, like handmade submissions. We got an enormous slush pile, a lot of poems from incarcerated people, from like, you just like everywhere, again, because you're coming from people who get the telephone book, right? So you get kind of everything. So I've been around this world for a really long time. And I've worked up from reading to becoming, part of an editorial board. So for me, having seen this vast change in how lit mags are run, operated, and thought about, and also the conversations around diversity, around access, around being a paying market, I was very intentional about the decision to make to start a magazine. I really wanted somebody else to do it. I was like, there clearly needs to be a space for people with queer fashion. And I was waiting around, looking around, talking to people, didn't see anyone do it. And in 2019, Anomaly, who I've worked for in various capacities for a long time, asked me if I wanted to edit a folio of some kind. And I was like, okay, well, here's this like opportunity to kind of dip my toes in the water. So I did a folio, one-time run folio, and I was just really excited about the fact that there were people I knew that submitted, and then there were people I'd never heard of, and people seemed really excited about it. So that was sort of like the beginning. For me personally, I have very strong feelings about why you should start a lit mag. And this is not to say anything against anyone's practices. This is just my personal ethics. It was really important to me that I had an editor that was Black. So that was a really important representation for me. And so that was why I joined up with Sarah Shepik, who's the co-editor in chief. And she also had a different sort of understanding and embodiment of queer identity, of queer fashion than I did. And so I felt like that was like a good combination. Our masthead is 99% people of color, very intentionally. And because we are a queer magazine, we're representing you couldn't represent everything anyway, but not as many identities within queerness as I want, but it does have like a very large range. We have editors from all sorts of parts of the writing world, which was really interesting, which was really important to me. So we have academics, we have people that just play in fashion, we have fiction writers, we have sort of people across a lot of different types of experiences, because for me, I did not want this to be like an academic lit mag. I want 15-year-olds to submit to us. I want fashion designers to submit to us. I want illustrators to submit to us. I want drag artists to submit to us. I don't just want it to be poetry, fiction, nonfiction. So that kind of leads me to one feeling I have, which is that in my opinion, if you don't have a very specific I don't think it needs to be like a theme like we have, but just a very specific thing that you see as a gap. I personally don't think that you should start a lit mag. And the reason I'm saying that is because of what Diamond said. There's so many. It is oversaturated. So in my opinion, you're not, first of all, if you don't have a clear vision, you're not going to get above the fray, and you'll just kind of close quickly. And that's really unfortunate, because that's pieces that people have published that they're now going to have to figure out a new home for. Okay, so that's part one. Part two, and for me, if you're asking my opinion, I think you should be a paying market in 2023. And I think you should have a plan for how to be a paying market. And I don't have any, I mean, I can give you some suggestions, but I don't have any, like, I don't think you should do it a certain way. I just think, you know, this is a very hard political and many other climates to survive as a writer. And so I think that that's the work that we need to do if we're going to participate in this field. I do think it's important. And I don't think you have to pay them a lot. I just think you should pay them as anything, you know, honestly. We have only been able to pay our artists through a renewable grant. I don't know what we would do if we lost that grant. I would just deal with it, you know, which would mean either I would pay for it, or I would take a hiatus until I could figure out how to pay for it. Some people use reading fees. I think there's a number of things you can do. Diversity and representation, you know, I already mentioned that this is important to me, but I also strongly would advise that for people coming into starting a lit mag. I personally think that if you look at all the institutional lit mags, almost all of them are run completely by not just like what, you know, white people, but white, cis, neurotypical, ableist. And so they are only going to have a very specific framework when they read submissions. And I just think the more, you know, I believe in being pro-Black, pro-POC anyway, but I just think the more perspectives you have, that means the more perspectives you're going to include. And it is really, to me, unconscionable, the amount of all white mastheads that we see. And those white mastheads directly reflect who is being published. And we all know that publishing also creates power. It creates opportunities for people to get books, to be seen by agents, to be seen by publishers. So it's not an isolated moment. And then skill sets. I would just really love for people to like know how to communicate, respond to emails. I think whatever workflow you want to use, some people use Discord. If you have money, we don't have, Submittable is really expensive. You can use Submittable. Duotrope, I think, is a really great option because they require a fee, but it's a very negligible fee. We use email, and that's worked fine for us. You know, the other thing I would say about deciding to start a lit mag is also knowing that you have enough money to just keep your website active, to keep your email accounts active. Like, you know, it does require this kind of like basic maintenance. And if you're kind of like hustling from month to month, it's probably not yet time for you to do something like that, right? These are all things you have to kind of think going forward. Like when you're hustling and you're trying to make things work, that's one thing. But when a whole community is relying on you, when a whole team is relying on you, then that ends up becoming very difficult and unstable. Cautionary tales. I would just say do your homework, make sure that the people you publish, the people you choose to edit with, that you at least try to make sure that there's nothing harmful or unethical in their history. You can't always know everything, but I think like a really fast search on both Twitter and Google will go a long way. Any sort of questions you have, because I've definitely done this before where I've been like, well, I kind of felt this sort of way, but it's not that big of a deal. Let me decide to work with them. And then those things come back, right? So I think you really want to think about your own instincts and if you are someone that doesn't think you can run a lit mag, but you have a great idea, then you become the founder and you go and you find someone that's able to do it. Don't feel like you have to be the one on the top. If, you know, it requires a lot, you know, it just requires a lot of juggling of a lot of different balls. And I think it's really important to know what you can and can't do. And so then you find the support for people who have those skill sets. And I think I'm gonna stop there. I feel like I've said enough. Okay.
Yeah, so I think Addie covered it pretty well. I think that was I mean, a lot of the things I was gonna say, like you've been in it for a long time, so you know what you're doing. I guess what I would say, and I think this kind of touches on a little bit what like Addie and Diamond and Nicole, actually everybody was saying, in relation to like wanting to start one, make sure there's like a gap, right? I think we talk about this a lot in like other publishing spheres, other genres, other different spheres in publishing, but right, like if you're sort of writing the same thing, you know, like how is your right, find your angle, like why is yours different, or like why do you think that your voice needs to be heard, right? As Addie was saying, like establishing a founder versus an editor-in-chief versus, you know, any other sort of role in there, like why is that necessary? And so I think, you know, if you have an idea or you have something that you really really want to do, and as Addie said, you know, like was waiting for somebody to come up with this idea and it wasn't there, and I think that's sort of what, at least it seems here, you know, we've all sort of have had those moments where like, okay, if nobody else is going to do it, like fine, I'll do it. And I think that's what tends to sort of happen in publishing. We all get to that point where we're like, okay, we'll do it ourselves. And so I think with that, like you have to have the passion for it. You also have to have the placement for it, right? Understanding where you are in the publishing industry, which helps, you know, with marketing. This is a job, you're selling creative work, you know, selling, I hate the word, but you know, all of it is just like putting it out there and making sure that your work gets seen. And so in that way, you have to have sort of both the passion, but also the you know, heretofore to be able to like jump into it feet first and just sort of figure it all out. But I'm trying to think of other questions. Different, oh yes, skill sets. I would say communication. I think Addie touched on this, but like communication, I think across the board is so important, and sort of just like transparency, whether that's amongst like your staff, if you are an editor-in-chief, right? Like making sure, you know, something's coming up and I'm not going to be able to hit this deadline, or we're going to have to move things around, or we may have to push this issue or move things there, or and also communicating with your contributors. I think that that's also very important, like having that transparency with the people who are submitting to you. You know, I've heard in the past where some people have sort of like blacklisted people from submitting, and like they don't necessarily say anything, which I think is, I don't, maybe this is just coming from my perspective, right? But if you think that they're not the right fit for the magazine, don't keep stringing along people who are submitting, right? Like don't keep saying like, oh, please send us more work, or we'd love to see some stuff from you. Like don't get people swept up. If you know that they're not the right fit, you know, you definitely can say it in a kind way, but you know, we're all in the industry together. And I think that that's one thing in terms of communication that I would say would be a skill to work on, is sort of that open communication with staff and with contributors. Yeah.
I'd be happy to jump off that. I wanted to go a little bit into what it can look like to start something, especially because I'm in the middle of this process right now for Abode. I've known for several years that this was something that I was going to do. It was just a matter of when and finalizing what our values were and why this was important. And so with so many literary magazines and news resources going down continuously, and all of the attacks on censorship and book bans specifically in Texas, it felt like the moment was now. And I had that feeling in December of last year. And so I reached out to TALA, which is Texas Accountants and Lawyers Association. And so they do a lot of good pro bono work for nonprofit arts organizations. And so I have a legal team that's helping me set up the business. I keep them on retainer. And so just even having that as a resource allows me to have full confidence and even create a legal entity, because that in itself is a lot and can be scary for a lot of people who aren't used to filling out documentations and stuff like that. And so that was just the first step for me. So I was working with them. And then I've seen so many lit mags. So this kind of ties into cautionary tales. I've seen a lot of lit mags just burn out because it's usually one person doing all of this work by themselves. And they it's cool to want to have passion to start something, but at the same time, I always say that passion is the first step. You should definitely be passionate about wanting to create change and wanting to start a literary magazine to provide representation for what you feel needs to be uplifted. But there is so much more that goes into it than just having passion. Because sometimes you're not going to have the passion on certain days, but you need to get the work done. And so that's when you reflect back on why you decided to do this, what your values are. For instance, for Abode, we're anti-colonialism, we're intersectional, we're anti-racist, and we believe in being in empathy. And so because of that, the masthead that we have is it's probably one of the most diverse mastheads I've ever seen. And that was an intentional decision. Like Addie was saying with her own, just Femme and Dandy. These are intentional decisions we do because it's important, because we want to see the representation also reflect in the work that we promote. And I want to talk about that on the side of my own writing and how I've seen that play out for myself, so that can help people see it in another context. But there was a piece that I was submitting to a lot of, I would say, like white-run institutions that kept getting declined. And the Hellbore, which is another diverse, inclusive magazine, saw potential in it and published it. And Denise, who's the founder and editor-in-chief, actually nominated it for Best of the Net. And it got selected to appear in Best of the Net, which is an extremely competitive landscape to get into, because you're going up against institution-ran organizations and also indie presses. But because she took a chance on my work, because she was able to relate to it and the diversity within it, it was able to even get to that next step of being nominated and being up to be selected. And so this is why it's important specifically to have diversity in our mastheads and to have independent presses and mags, because it does level the playing field. If Denise hadn't taken a chance on me, then I don't know where that piece would have ended up. I would have thought it wasn't good enough. And now it's in Best of the Net, and so that's what it looks like on a writer's level and why representation is important. And so, yeah, with Abode, there's a lot that goes into it. I'm currently finding sponsors, I'm finding donors. I have a team of over 25 people. That was also an intentional decision, because I wanted the best of the best people to run this magazine that I have full trust in, that I know have the talent, not because of their accolades or anything like that, because I know that they're good people and they're hard workers and they're great writers. And so they're all extremely busy, and so when I was talking to them, they were like, I want to do this, but also I work for 3 other mags. I'm in school. I'm in my PhD program. I have kids, blah, blah, blah. I was like, that's okay. I am going to make sure you have the lowest amount of workload possible. So you're going to read 1 to 5 submissions a week. It might require 2 hours of your time max, and I'll work with you if you want to read less, because it's important to me that I have the masthead that I believe in and that I trust, and not just let anybody in, because I want to make sure that we have professionalism and stuff like that. Oh, Addie, did you want to hop in? Were you raising your hand?
Can I say one real quick thing about what you said? So in terms of talking about workload, there have been a couple of times where we've been able to give a small stipend to our editorial staff through grant, but for the most part, it's unpaid. Most editorial positions are unpaid. And I'm very cognizant and aware also that when you are, asking Black people, asking disabled people, asking people of color to work on your magazine, there is this kind of tension around that and just what it means to live in those bodies in this time, but also around this idea of unpaid labor. So first of all, I always make myself available for anything that they need. We are so nuanced that we don't actually get that many submissions, but I want this to be a really joyous and positive experience for them. So I make it very clear that I'm willing to take on whatever work that they might need help with. We had one editor who got COVID right before the issue was to launch, and so I took care of her submissions, but also one of my editors is disabled, and so I will do a lot of access forward things with them, including reading submissions to them on voice text, so they don't have to expend their screen energy. So I also, I just wanted to speak to that too, because you can't just put all of these diversities on your masthead, include disabled and chronically ill people, and then act like there isn't something you have to think about and how they're able to participate in working at your magazine. So I just kind of wanted to say a little bit about that, because it reminded me of it. So yeah, but go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, because that's something that I was considering too. Is just like, you all are all just being so amazing, being like representing like your communities and your people. And I want you all of us to come together and create this intersectional space. But I also know that we're just starting out and I can't pay everybody for their time. So I want less of your time, you know? And so that was a really big thing. And that was why I was able to get everybody to join. It actually surprised me with how basically nobody told me no, which I just shot my shot with so many people that I admire in the industry, and they all wanted to band together with this cause. It's giving us a lot of hope because we're in this time where there's so much going on, that to be a part of something where it's going to create change in community is just so impactful for all of us. And so, yeah, I just wanted to touch on like the cautionary tales just for a second, but that's just something to think about, is like, if you're going to start something, I would highly recommend not doing it on your own. I just see too many times where lit mags just get burnt out in the middle of contracts, in the middle of having pieces that are supposed to be coming out, and then they just drop all of their authors. Some of these authors don't even find out until it's like announced on Twitter that the press is going down. There is no like formal communication. And so I'm seeing a lot of like unprofessionalism in the industry as well. It's like, we have to remember that if you are starting an organization, if you're publishing other people's work, you're not just working for yourself. It's not just a passion project anymore. And so there needs to be procedures and guidelines in place to protect the work, to archive the work, so people don't have dead links to something that was their first publication that they were very proud of, and now they can't find that anywhere. And so that's just something that I keep seeing over and over again. And I don't think there's enough discussion about how important it is to be professional. And I'm not saying that presses can't shut down, but there needs to be steps that are taken to ensure that it's done in an efficient way. And so it's like, if people don't get opportunities taken away from them in the middle of that process. So,
Nicole, what do you have to add? Because I know you've got a lot of these areas in there too.
Yeah, so Knee Brace is a lit mag that is specifically geared towards disability, chronic conditions, et cetera. So most of the folks on our masthead are neurodiverse, are chronically ill, et cetera, in some way. And so kind of like what, to go off of what Addie was touching on before about, your ethics and about, not starting a lit mag kind of until you're ready to support these certain things. We function kind of differently, where we don't necessarily have, we don't have funding right now. We don't have, we're very much based in the in the passion stage, but because of that, I'm not putting too much on my staff right now, if that makes sense. So people, we have submissions open every 3 months. So there are four periods in a year. And within those periods, editors don't look at more than one or two submissions. And, we're still pretty small, and, we might have to change some things as we grow. But, because of that, we're kind of just vibing that this is a space that is, we're not necessarily looking to, we're all online. We're all, we publish weekly. We don't have like a big, like kind of finished product at the end, but a lot of the other things that were really important to me in creating this space were community and creating a space where we could talk about these different topics as well. So I was brought into the Lit Mag space largely by Julian Esteban Torres Lopez, who runs the National. And he really taught me the value of like having this space as like the basis for a larger community. So some of the other things we do are author interviews. So we talk to authors who are writing about these topics and promoting their work. We have this summer, we're going to have our first summer series. So we have some really cool authors coming to talk about like their work. The, people from the community are invited. They're, free tickets on Eventbrite. But to, slip that in there. But yeah, so I think that those were the things that were most important to me in building this, were accessibility to for folks working on it, and also for folks submitting. Like we give a lot of leeway for deadlines and turning things around, and we're very flexible in that. But then also using this space as a basis to do some of the things that I was excited about, and that I think other people have been excited about as well. I hope that makes sense. But
Absolutely.
but yeah, so I think that, folks covered these pretty well, but yeah, I think that one of the things I wanted to reiterate was that diversity is so important, um, within the masthead, within the writing, and that it's really important to be able to listen to folks, as well, from the community, who are working on your staff. If someone says that something isn't accessible, or that something isn't working for them to work with them. um, I think that's it from me.
Well, but you also kind of launched my next set of questions, which you've all touched on them pretty well so far. But okay, so my next set of questions, and Nicole, we can actually even start with you.
Sure.
So you mentioned that yours is entirely online. How do you choose your format, your marketing, but then also finding your audience and your contributors?
Yeah. For the first bit about format, you mean like how to decide that this is going to be like an online?
Yeah, online, and how do you decide, if it's something that you're gonna put out in a, like a
Mhm.
electronic document format versus this, more of just a web-based option,
Sure.
or print,
Yeah.
or, limited run print, things like that.
Yeah, so this is something that I discussed with some of the people that are now on the masthead, or so some folks that are just my friends that have been involved in lit mags, that we talked about kind of best practices. And so for Knee Brace, we publish pretty much weekly. And since I'm the one doing it, if I don't have spoons that week, we're probably just gonna wait next week to have a piece, and that's, again, we're just kind of vibing. But I think that for me, I wanted to be able to kind of highlight each piece individually and give them that kind of like moment in the spotlight, versus to have a full finished print product, which is neither is, better or worse than the other. But that was where my line of thinking was. And then what was the second question?
So finding your audience and your contributors.
Yeah, so we had talked before about social media, and so that has been really good for me. I started off, in the vein of, kind of doing this when you're ready. I have been, kind of in the disability space and in the writing space, et cetera, for a long time. So not as long as Lauren and Addie, but so I kind of, started there, and was able to, get to know more folks. I know where kind of the disability writer spaces are on Twitter and Instagram, and whatever else. I have a very niche kind of book talk account where I talk a lot about my own chronic conditions and neurodivergences, et cetera. So people saw me talking about that on there and were able to come on. So I think knowing the community that you're a part of is super important. And you know I think with anything that's social justice based or community based, et cetera, I think it's important to know that community and be a part of that community and be working for something for all of you. That this is a magazine that, like, I'm not, I don't think we're gonna win any Nobel prizes or anything, but I'm working to make this small part of like the disability community more accessible, and to make that writing more accessible. So I think that answers the question.
For sure. And Diamond, especially, you're just starting out a boat as well. What do you have to add?
Yeah, so for a boat, we're actually going to do ebooks and print books for each chapbook, primarily because I'm not fully sure what international shipping is going to look like. And I know that a lot of international readers like to purchase ebooks. I know that a lot of people in general like to just read their ebooks. And so we're going to just do both, just so we can create more accessibility. And that allows us to just kind of have a forever run for our chapbooks, because they're not going to, for an ebook, it's not going to go anywhere. And then for print books, I think right now we're looking at doing 150 to 200 print runs for each chapbook. And the way that we are building our audience, Twitter has been amazing. And also that's kind of the benefit of having such a large team as well, that's very well connected, is we're all bringing in our own people and readers and writers that are familiar with us and that believe in our mission. And so that's actually been really helpful, is just having a unified team, spreading the word about Abode. A lot of our team is extremely talented writers at the same time. And so we're all going to conferences, we're all going to what are those called? Like retreats, writing retreats. We're all getting accepted into so many things that's going to put us in connections with others that we want to share abode with. And so just even having just a unified, strong team has already helped tremendously with just getting the word out. But also I have been doing the work of going to local press, other local presses. So we have a few in Central Texas. There's Infralista Review, which they're also in Central Texas. There's Host Publications, which you guys might know of. They're based in Austin, but they have some really great chapbook runs and good prizes. And so I've just been doing the work of trying to get connected with all of the bookstores, all of the local presses and lit mags, trying to get the word out that I'd like to do some collaborations and events. And so once we launch, I think that's when we're really going to start drawing in a lot of people, but it's already happening, which is really cool. A lot of people are really excited about our mission. And I think because we're based in Central Texas, it means that much more to so many, because we're seeing a lot of, not to get into politics or anything, but we are seeing a lot of censorship and things against marginalized communities, specifically in the South, specifically in Texas and in Florida. And so there is something very beautiful about having something that goes against everything that you see online that's happening, to show that we are here, these communities do exist, and we are fighting back, and it's important to do that. I think we'll be partnering up with Kindred Stories. They're a Black bookstore in Houston, and probably doing some work with the ACLU to fight in the actual legislature. But we're going to do pretty much as we can to promote our mission, because that will also help us bring in the people that care about what we're doing and that will want to support our authors as well. But we're going to be doing a lot of community work, and that will also help bring in the people that we want to be surrounded with, and that want to build community in times where it feels like we're all so apart. And so I think it's just been really beautiful to kind of create that space, and I'm just watching it grow, and I'm seeing my team be really happy. And we have a Slack channel that's called Community Hangs, and everyone just hangs out on there and shares anything, and we all just hang out. It's a very beautiful space. And so I'm excited to see where it goes.
Awesome. And then Lauren and Addie, what do y'all have to add?
Yeah, I have a couple of things to add about format. So I guess you could consider that we have 3 different formats. For those of you that know anything about astrology, I have 5 placements in Virgo. So I like to do the most always, and a Capricorn moon. That's not even all my Earth. So we have a Squarespace, web-based site, where, because we felt it was really important that people can share their individual links. That's really like a key thing. But we also wanted to show like a flip through magazine. So we have issue ISSUU that they can kind of flip through and see the design. And then we do have one right here. And then we do have a print-based magazine. Hold on. Can you see it? Okay. When you do these things, it's so annoying. Okay.
If you hold it like in front of your shirt, I think, yeah.
There we go. But
Yay.
we can also share the, if you'll send me links, I'll drop it in chat as well during the
Okay, yeah.
actual panel.
Oh yeah, I'll do that. So the layout of that was sort of done a little bit rushed because we've had a lot of shifting designers. So I do want to really revamp the layout. And now that we got this really extensive renewal for our grant, I want to look into like widespread distribution of it. But it's a fashion magazine, so we want a print version of it. It's very image heavy, image focused. And because we work with a lot of artists that are not in the writing community, that are drag artists or performers, who we want them to have something that they can see of themselves, that they can have for their archive. But the other thing I wanted to say about format, which also goes back to what are important things to keep in mind when running literary magazines, has to do with accessibility. So I think it's super important that you have image description / alt text. I think you should have them for headshots. I think you should have them for any image that you include. I think that there should be audio transcripts and video descriptions of any media. And I do want to represent ourselves as an example of this, because people are doing it on Instagram and then they're running magazines and they're not doing it anywhere else. And it's not a hard thing to do. We require people who submit to submit image descriptions. I love when people have no idea about it, because then I can actually tell them, I can be like, here's a link, here's a resource, you know. Some people have tried to tell me that they're uncomfortable writing descriptions of their images, and I just very gently say, like, I totally hear you, and if you really feel like you can't do it, I will do it for you. But I think it's really important work for us to be doing, and usually that ends up being like a really productive conversation. So along with that, I think that you have to think about design, clean, concise design that people can read, legible fonts large enough that they can be read. Like thinking about things from an accessibility standpoint. A lot of people, when they first start out, they want to make their work look really flashy, and the design is so busy that it's really hard on the eyes. It's really hard for people who are neurodiverse or have, and now that we have all these chronic issues coming out from, long-term COVID, it's going to become even more of an issue for people. So I just wanted to bring that up in terms of web formats, and I don't think there's anything else I need to say about that. So yeah, so those were the things I wanted to just kind of.
But I love that you brought it up, because these are things that, like, as a full-time web and graphic designer, I'm like, it can be pretty all day, but it doesn't matter if no one can use it. Lauren, what do you have before we get into final thoughts?
Yeah, I think one of the other just things I wanted to add in terms of accessibility, and I know that we have been attempting to implement, obviously, there's only so much you can ask from contributors, and there are going to be some contributors who, of course, are uninterested or don't want to. But what we've been trying to do, at least on our end, poetry, I think, is something that is such a specific form of writing, and it's meant to be listened to. And so one of the things that we've been doing in terms of accessibility is trying to have audio recordings for every poem that we have. And so we've really been pushing over the last, I want to say, at least 2 or 3 issues to try to have an audio recording, which we've been hosting on SoundCloud. And I know that I'm sure there's something better out there, but I think something is better than nothing. Having it really accessible, and also using in our print editions, we also make sure to have like a QR code that links directly to that audio file for people. So that's something that I think is important. I think we've all touched on accessibility, but I think just having it at the forefront of your mind and understanding that, everybody who's going to be reading or listening to or looking at whatever sort of creative work you're putting out there may be coming from a different background, I think is something that's really important to understanding. I know at least all 4 of us in here have a lot of different intersections, and I think we can see how that comes through in the work that we're doing ourselves and that we're in charge of sort of editing or working on, and I think that is something that's starting to be reflected in publishing today.
Phenomenal. Well, we are running up on the end of our panel time. Do we have any final thoughts? Anything that we missed in our questions? Anything you want to add?
I think I would just say read widely. I feel like a lot of people will give the same sort of, oh, you're looking for poetry, take a look at, these 3 or 4 spots. Or I think there's some great literary magazines out there who are doing some fantastic work. And I think just being inquisitive and researching as much as you can. I know we've all talked about some spaces on, writing Twitter and a bunch of spots that people are looking at. But I think I would just say try to read as widely as you can, because there's some amazing work out there right now in these literary magazines.
I think in the vein of final thoughts, I'm still, knee brace is so new, and I'm still so new to this side of lit mags. I've been a contributor across various lit mags, but this is me kind of running this space for the first time. And so I think just that I've learned a lot from all 3 of y'all, and this has been just a really cool conversation for me to take part of and just listen to y'all talking. So I'm glad we could all be here.
Been very exciting for me, who has never worked in them but thinks they're really cool.
I was just going to say, pay attention to the things that really annoy you about the lit mag field, and use that as a way to inspire you. If you notice something that is missing or you feel is not being done well, I think that's one of the most beautiful ways, actually, that you can create something like really positive and productive in the community, which is, you know, I think a lot of us do that, but I know Diamond and I especially, like, that is really where we're motivated. So
So yeah, like personally, thank you all. It's been really exciting hearing everything you have to say. Thank you from a Ride Hike point of view. I'm excited for all the questions that we have coming in through chat. So again, thank you all for being here, both for our panelists and for our participants this year. Yeah, if we don't have anything else to add, I will hit the stop recording button.